Joining us right now, CBS Sports. We will get all the info on where you can hear, read, write, listen, whatever it is. You can consume yourself some Dave Richard as he joins us right now. Good morning, David. How are you?
What's up, Dave? Good to hear your voice.
Hey, good to hear yours. Been a while. Everything good?
Everything's fine. I'm not swimming or anything like that, so ready to just crush it in some fantasy leagues this week.
This is for many the start of the playoffs this week or next week, depending on the size of your league, but we're definitely in playoff territory here. So as we often like to do, Dave, let's start philosophy before we get specifics. In your mind, the biggest mistake people make once they hit fantasy football playoff time?
The biggest mistake that they make... That's a good question.
I repeat questions, too, when I'm searching for an answer. It's a good trick. I figured...
Thank you very much. Yeah, this isn't my first time being on a radio show. I think maybe it comes down to overthinking. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. You got Kenny Golladay. Maybe you benched him last week because you heard that they were starting a third-string quarterback, and you're nervous to use him because he's taking on Minnesota. And then Zach Pascal's on the waiver wire. Yep. And Zach Pascal had a 100-yard game last week, and it looks like he's the number one receiver for Indianapolis, and he's taking on Tampa Bay. So you might rush to put Pascal ahead of Golladay in your lineup. And if you were getting points for targets, you'd probably make the right call. But I think Galladay's the better player. He's probably part of the reason why you made the fantasy playoffs. And against Minnesota, and this isn't overthinking, this is just knowing what's going on, the Vikings defense played 75 snaps at Seattle on Monday, and they've got to turn around and get ready to play the Lions on Sunday. The Lions last played 8 days ago, and so they've had a little bit more time to rest and prepare, and at least we've seen one game where this third-string quarterback didn't look like a third-string quarterback, and he was smart enough to target Golladay deep. And there's no T.J. Hockenson anymore, so Galladay's targets could go up. I think overthinking it and going with Pascal over Golladay, you'd hate to put somebody with as much upside as Golladay has on your bench. And we could apply that to a bunch of guys. Dalvin Cook could be another one who people are nervous about because they just don't know how much he's going to play, but you probably drafted him. He's probably one of the reasons why you made the fantasy playoffs. So I would lean towards saying that overthinking is a constant problem for people at this time of the year. Just do the same thing this week as you've done every week. Make the decisions the same way you have every week, and you should be okay.
Well, something I'm completely overthinking, Dave. Rashad Penny, I mean, there was a lot of touches that went around last week. Am I still good starting him, or do you see them being the Seahawks limiting the touches of the running backs this week?
So one of the things that I liked about the Seahawks run game when I researched this one is that the last 3 times they played the Rams, they ran the ball a ton. The lead back for Seattle had a great game. The second running back for Seattle had a great game in 2 of the 3 games. And I think they're going to try and do the exact same thing. So Carson's a must. I just think people have to continue to start him. And I think Penny is good enough to call a low-end number 2 running back, regardless of format. He's probably a little bit better in PPR than non-PPR. But I look at running backs, and this might go against what I just said, but Phillip Lindsay, who's been bad for the last 3 or 4 weeks, might not be the reason why you made the fantasy playoffs in your league. I would start Penny over him. I would have started Penny over Montgomery. You can look at my rankings. You can see it there. Darius Geis, who's come out of nowhere to play really well for Washington despite limited work, I would go Penny over him. Sony Michel, who probably hasn't helped you do anything, and Penny is better than him. So I think you look at the circumstances, and you would do that every week in fantasy football, and you would say, all right, Penny's got a chance to play well. We've seen a track record of Seattle running the ball well. It's what they want to do. I'm going to give him a shot.
Dave Richard joining us from CBS Sports. Dave, what's your general rule in the leagues you're in? I've seen this happen before. A team that's out of the playoffs dropping talented players, team in the playoffs picking up talented players. What do you generally do, or what do you see? What stop gaps to prevent that, or are there?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. If you didn't make the playoffs and your league is in playoff mode, sorry, your lineup's locked. You can't do anything to it. I think it's kind of a Bush League move to start cutting players. My dad did this once. My dad did this, Dave, where it was his first and only year playing fantasy football. He stuck with it all year. He didn't make the playoffs. He just starts cutting everybody off of his team. He's like, I'm trying to help other people in the league. I said, Dad, it doesn't work that way. You're not playing games anymore. You can't make ad drops. Your season is over. You know, it's not like we're seeing players from the Cincinnati Bengals getting cut just because they didn't make the playoffs. It's preposterous, and it's almost like you're doing it out of spite. Like, oh, well, I didn't make the playoffs. Well, get a load of me now, and then they do something stupid. But yeah, however, I have to say this: if you're in the final week of your regular season and you're out of it, you're still entitled to make moves.
Sure,
you can add and drop players. I wouldn't drop Saquon Barkley off your team just to be a jerk or whatever. Try and play and win if it's the last week of your regular season. But you can still make adds and drops if you're still in it. You're not in it if it's the fantasy playoffs and your record is 3-10.
But that's where the commissioner comes in on those moves, you would think.
I would think so. Yeah. It's where a normal person and a rational person would say, darn, I missed my playoffs. Life sucks, but I know that I can go on and do other things like watch Netflix now that the fantasy year's over.
Now, I once threatened, and I don't do this. I'm not this type of guy at all. I can't stress that more. The only time I've ever threatened to quit a league was about 5 years ago, and there were two teams in contention. And I was one of them. The team I was going to play the following week consummated a trade. This thing had we were coming down. It was trade deadline time, and their trade included not just the players. It was a lopsided trade, but also a cash payout. And I contended that you cannot have cash as part of a trade, that it goes directly to, you're going to have people that are more rich or invested in the league now using financial means, whereas the other side was saying, well, hold on a second. If I can recoup some or all of my fantasy entry fee, I'm going to do it. Which side do you side on in those situations?
It's unethical to add parts to a fantasy trade that have nothing to do with the league.
Thank you.
I mean, think about it, Dave. You could offer somebody in the league, I'll give you a chance to come on the air and be my co-host for a day.
Sure.
And what a thrill that would be.
Sure.
And in exchange for that, you've got to give me Julio Jones, and I'll give you Sterling Shepard.
Right.
Oh. So it's not fair. You can't give Sterling Shepard an hour of radio time for Julio Jones. It doesn't work that way. So as long as trades are within the realm of the fantasy league, they don't involve lunches or cash or
no side bets.
How about future draft picks, by the way?
Future draft picks is a different story, but you got to make sure that both owners are committed to being in the league if that's going to happen.
Okay.
Dave Richards, CBS Sports, joining us. Dave, I picked up Tyler Higbee last week. Worked out great for me. It looks like Gerald Everett's going to miss another week. Is Higbee still a tight end one option this week?
Absolutely. Seattle isn't as bad of a defense against tight ends as Arizona is. Like, the word is out. The league knows that Arizona just can't cover tight ends, and they're taking advantage. But I think the Rams are learning what Higbee can do, and I'm thinking that he's going to continue to be a part of this offense. And it's not quite the same situation for the Seahawks as it is for the Vikings defense. They did play on Monday, but they didn't play nearly as many snaps as Minnesota's defense. But I still think they're in a tough spot. So it's just a matter of just how much work Gurley gets and how competitive the game is. That'll impact Higbee. If it ends up being a high-scoring game like it typically is between these two teams, then I see Tyler Higbee having a very nice game.
From Bill Smith in Reno asks Bill Smith, half a PPR league. What, Jay? Why are you laughing?
No idea.
I have one flex position. I have Devontae Freeman, Brandon Cooks, Dede Westbrook, Kenny Stills, and Raheem Mostert. Anybody jump out at you?
Yeah, it's going to be Devontae Freeman. I think Bill's going to be really happy with this one because it's a Florida State Seminole running back who actually has a chance to have a great game. The Panthers have allowed 16 touchdowns to running backs in their last 8 games.
Gotcha.
It's absurd. And their defense is getting weaker, and the Falcons' offensive line seems to be getting a little stronger. And I think this is a good opportunity for Freeman to come through for a big game.
I asked you this question earlier in the year, and I made a mental note. I wanted to follow up with you towards the end of the year. I'll probably ask you this one more time at the end of the year. Going into next year when some people are in keeper leagues, auction leagues, et cetera, and deciding on current players, what are your thoughts on Austin Eckler and his value for next season?
Yeah, it really comes down to where Melvin Gordon is and what the running back situation is for the Chargers. Because I think Austin Eckler isn't going to go anywhere. He's a restricted free agent, if I recall correctly. I don't see a team breaking the bank and giving up a draft pick for Austin Eckler. But I do see him I don't know if the Chargers see him as an every down guy. I think his role is going to be his role, and I think Eckler is going to have to share with somebody. I doubt it'll be Melvin Gordon because I think the Chargers will move on from him. But it could be somebody as simple as Justin Jackson, or it could be a draft pick that they take. So I would expect Eckler to be in the same position that he's been in for most of this year with Melvin Gordon.
Dave, got to look at, again, going back to the Seahawks and Rams. Those three receivers, I mean, Robert Woods had a monster week last week. Of the three receivers, Cooks, Woods, and Kupp on the Rams, who do you see rank those guys as who's going to have the better week?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Woods. He's given you at least 15 PPR points each of his past 3 games. I love the usage that he had last week. And look, it was kind of out of control. I don't think he's going to get close to 20 targets again, but I'm sure he's going to get at least 9 or 10. And that's enough for me to trust him against Seattle. And I think Cooper Kupp's going to stay involved too, playing in the slot. He's been the security blankie for Jared Goff for much of their time together in L.A. I see that continuing on. The guy that I can't trust, especially in my fantasy playoffs, is Brandon Cooks. Where's the evidence that he's going to go off against the Seattle defense? And again, high-scoring game, maybe he scores, but I can probably name 35 receivers that I'd rather start ahead of Brandon Cooks off the top of my head. And if I really thought about it, I could probably name 10 more after that.
One more off the text line and email before we get to phone calls. This one from John Berndenson in San Francisco, saying,
big signal out here,
huge
Dave.
Fan.
Is it the traditional spelling of Verdinson?
Yes, as a matter of fact, capital V, 1D.
No, there's a silent K in there.
I'm playing a team this weekend that has multiple players involved in the New Orleans game. Jimmy Garoppolo, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, San Francisco's defense, and Robbie Gould. Is that a good or a bad thing for me?
It's probably a good thing because I don't see it being a super high-scoring game. I think you're looking at it where the defense, I think both defenses will be fairly good in the game. I don't see a letdown game coming from either one of them, certainly not from the Saints defense. They've been playing great all year. I'd be worried about one of Kamara or Thomas going off and the other one just being okay. And if Garoppolo is the quarterback, I think you'd invite that. I think it's going to be tough for him to have one of those big games that we've seen from him.
All right, 339-1140, 1-800-920-1140. Vince, you're on the phone with CBS Sports' Dave Richard. Go ahead.
Hey, Dave. I have a question for one of my season-long leagues, PPR. I'm going to throw out a lot of player names, but it's all going to make sense. It's just running back and receivers. So I had a pretty successful waiver wire period, and I managed to get Zach Pascal, Benny Snell, Rashad Penny, Alexander Madison, and Sterling Shepard. However, I'm having issues trying to figure out who to bench between Mark Ingram, Chris Carson, Michael Thomas, Devontae Parker, and Adam Thielen. Who should I start and sit in this week's matchup? Because it's a win and get into the championship for me. Thanks.
Yeah, I get it.
You got all that, Dave?
I got it all. I got it all, and I can boil it down to this. If Thielen plays, you'll start him. If not, Pascal is your guy at receiver.
You see, that's why he makes the big bucks, Jay. You see, I lost track after like 2 players, dude. That's insane. Otis, you're on the phone with CBS Sports' David Richard. Hello.
Hello. Morning, Dave. Hey, I'm just wondering, am I crazy for considering benching Mahomes and starting Tannehill based on matchups this week?
Yeah, I think that's pretty crazy. I mean, you just saw Sean Watson have a great game against this Patriots defense, and I would imagine that Mahomes, who's had 2 very good games in his career already against New England, can come through for a third. I kind of think Kansas City wins the game. Oh. There's just things off about the Patriots offense. They really didn't get going until the very end when the game was in hand for Houston. And this defense, they showed some holes last week, and Andy Reid can take advantage of that. So, especially in the case of Tannehill, who seems like a safe fantasy quarterback, like he can get you anywhere between 17 and 23 fantasy points, and it could be a tough game for him against the Raiders. I'm going to go with Mahomes because he has a chance to get you like 35 fantasy points. I can't leave that on my bench when the other alternative is Ryan Tannehill.
Before we get to our next phone call, I know we only
Dave, that's overthinking, by the way. That's another example of straight up overthinking.
There it is.
Into the playoffs.
Couldn't have planted that call any better, Dave. I don't know if you have this on the top of your head, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, but I want to give you a homework assignment.
Okay.
unless it exists already, can we come up with a past player and use that player's name for the annual "this guy got picked up late in the year and helped carry somebody to the championship" award? I know there's different examples, and I'm wondering if we could maybe come together and assign a specific player to that award, so I can ask you things like, hey, Dave, who do you think this year's Fred Smith is going to be? And you'll know what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't think Fred Smith is going to get it, but my initial reaction was to think back to the year when the Titans rolled out Billy Volek and Drew Bennett.
Oh, Sac State head coach or former head coach's son, Billy Volek.
Yeah, I wonder if they played well enough. Gosh, it must have been. Was it even the early 2000s when this happened? It might have been the year 2000. I could look it up, but we could go with that.
Okay.
Those two were definitely two that come to mind as late season dudes that help people win fantasy championships. But you know who else did, Dave?
Oh.
Tim Tebow.
Oh, that's right.
Back in the day when he was the Broncos starting running back, Tim Tebow had himself some monster games in fantasy because of his rushing totals. I know that I won a fantasy championship with Tim Tebow as my starting quarterback. And
I'm sorry, I heard you say running back. Are you besmirching the good arm of Tim Tebow, Dave Richard, on this radio station?
I said what I said. Look, I started picking him up as a good luck charm for my fantasy championship games, and ever since then, I've found a player every year that I would drop a player on my bench right before game time, someone who I knew I wasn't going to start, and I would pick up a good luck charm. And it works. I don't think I've ever lost a game in my fantasy championship with a good luck charm on my bench. So we'll have to find that guy.
Yeah.
Week 16.
I like your idea.
Billy Volek, 2004.
I like the Billy Volek idea. Yeah. And honestly, when we get off the air, God bless you guys if you know it. There was a receiver with Jake Delhomme a while back. And like Steve
Smith.
No, it wasn't Steve Smith. It was somebody that did nothing before and nothing after, but I think they had 12 touchdowns that year. Never had more than 2 in any other year. And I want to say in the last 4 weeks of the season, this receiver had like 6 or 7 touchdowns and all 100-yard games. I got to go back and look, Dave. I'll have it for you.
I'm gonna look at that for Delhomme. Now, does this person have to play well into week 15 and 16, or they just have to play well late in the year?
I think
Billy Volek fell apart in weeks 15 and in week 16 and 17. So back in 2004, he had 3 touchdowns in week 12, 4 touchdowns in weeks 13 and 14. So everybody's starting him in week 16. Week 14 and 15, he had the 4 touchdowns, excuse me. And then in week 16, everyone's starting him against Denver, and he completes 8 of 20 passes for 111 yards and 2 interceptions. And in the fantasy championship, he let him down. So maybe Billy Volek isn't the best guy to use as an example for this.
We'll figure it out by next week. And we are so out of time, but I'm not letting you off the air without giving yourself a plug. Where can people read, see, and hear you?
You can find me at CBSSportsHQ.com. That's the live streaming service of CBSSports.com. We're going to be live at 9 a.m. with a recap of Thursday's game and a look ahead to all the games in week number 14, including DFS action.
You're the best in the business, buddy. Appreciate you. Talk to you next week.
Kerry Colbert, the receiver you're looking for?
It's not Kerry Colbert. It's not. We'll know it when we find it. I swear to God, I will find it for you. Or you and I will text each other later with
I'm
the
sending you a DM right. I won't even send a DM. I'll send it live over Twitter so other people can chime in.
Thank you,
I got a link for you to look through.
All right, you take care.
There, Dave.
That's Dave Richards, CBS Sports.
The Drive.